In 1980, one film destroyed 104 cars in a single production. That is not a typo. Hollywood stunt coordinators in the 1980s were dropping vehicles from helicopters at 1,200 feet, building world record jump ramps in the Nevada desert, and sending real trucks off real cliffs with cardboard boxes listed as safety equipment. I've got The Blues Brothers here, the film that set a Guinness World Record for vehicle destruction that stood for 18 years. I've got Hal Needham, the man who broke 56 bones inventing the tools the entire decade ran on. And there is one stunt car that a major television network purchased for exactly $1. How did one decade completely rewrite the rules of what a car could do on screen? Let's find out. To understand why the 1980s transformed Hollywood car stunt work, you have to understand what the 1970s left behind. The muscle car era of the 1960s and early 1970s gave cinema The Bullet Chase, The French Connection, Vanishing Point. Those were films built on raw displacement and driver skill, shot with a kind of gritty precision that reflected the machines themselves. Then the 1973 OPEC oil crisis arrived. CAFE fuel economy standards kicked in. Emissions regulations strangled output across the entire industry. The 1975 Corvette produced 165 horsepower, a car that once defined American performance turned up in showrooms barely capable of a meaningful chase sequence. But here is where it gets genuinely interesting. The same regulations that killed muscle car output had an unintended effect on stunt work. Cars got lighter. Between 1975 and 1983, average vehicle weight fell over 30%. Electronic fuel injection replaced carburetors, eliminating cold start failures and fuel starvation under extreme conditions. Unibody construction replaced body-on-frame designs across the industry. All of that changed how a car behaved in the air, on a ramp, and on impact. Lighter cars launched higher. They rolled more dramatically. They crumpled on camera in ways that muscle cars simply could not. The wedge-shaped aerodynamic profiles that defined the era, the Countach, the Testarossa, the Trans Am, brought a visual dimension the boxy vehicles of the 1970s could not match. The enthusiast community now calls this the Radwood era, covering roughly 1980 to 1999, defined by the cars, the design language, and the cultural moment surrounding them. Stunt coordinators who learned to exploit those characteristics built some of the most technically ambitious sequences in cinema history. The decade did not just change which cars appeared on screen, it changed the physics of what those cars could do. The Wraith is the 1980s car film almost nobody saw, built around a vehicle almost nobody knew existed. Released in 1986 and starring Charlie Sheen, the film featured the Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor, a genuine 1981 prototype developed jointly by Chrysler and PPG Industries. This was not a replica or a dressed-up prop. It was a real mid-engine, twin-turbocharged concept car producing over 440 horsepower with a documented top speed of 194.8 miles per hour. 6 copies of the M4S were constructed for production. 2 were fully drivable stunt cars. 4 were aerodynamic shells built specifically to be destroyed on camera. You'd think a production with access to one of the most technically advanced cars ever placed on a movie set would have made a serious commercial impact. The Wraith made around $7 million at the domestic box office. Nobody talks about it. But here is what actually matters about this production. The stunt team had to develop entirely new handling approaches for a vehicle, unlike anything in the standard toolkit. The M4S had a ground-hugging aerodynamic profile and a mid-engine layout that made standard ramp geometry essentially useless. The team adapted in real time on a budget that offered almost no room for error. The sole surviving original M4S was later purchased at auction by comedian Jeff Dunham. 4 of the 6 production vehicles were destroyed on camera. That means the majority of one of the rarest automotive prototypes in American manufacturing history ended up as filmed wreckage in a low-budget supernatural thriller. Cobra began life as a rejected screenplay, and the film very nearly never happened at all. Sylvester Stallone wrote an early, considerably more action-driven version of Beverly Hills Cop that Paramount ultimately passed on. Stallone kept the material, reworked it, and built it around a car he personally owned, a 1950 Mercury Coupe running a 350 cubic inch supercharged Chevrolet engine with nitrous, producing over 600 horsepower. License plate, a WSOM 50. Customizer Eddie Paul built 4 versions of the Mercury for the production. 1 was designated for close work and interior sequences. 3 were dedicated stunt cars, built to handle high-speed side swipes, 180-degree spins, and a jump from the second floor of a parking garage. Cobra opened on May 23, 1986, and grossed around $49 million domestic on a $25 million budget. You'd think a film generating nearly double its production cost in domestic gross alone would count as a clear win. Stallone considered it a disappointment. Here is what the film actually established, though. The idea of a celebrity-owned, personally significant, obsessively built vehicle as the centerpiece of an action film was not entirely new, but Cobra committed to it more completely than anything that came before. The car was not a prop. It was a statement. That logic, the specific car as an extension of the specific person behind the wheel, did not disappear when the decade ended. It became the creative logic the biggest car franchise in film history eventually ran on. To Live and Die in L.A. contains the finest car chase filmed during the entire decade. Full stop. Director William Friedkin first developed the concept in 1963 when he fell asleep at the wheel driving home from a wedding, woke up facing oncoming traffic in the wrong lane, and spent the next 22 years trying to put that specific sensation on screen. The wrong-way freeway chase that eventually resulted from that experience took 6 weeks to film, required 40 stunt drivers, and used approximately 900 hired vehicles across the sequence. The director of photography, Robbie Mueller, refused to shoot it. He reviewed the production plan and walked away on safety grounds. Second unit cameraman Robert Yeoman, who would later become Wes Anderson's long-term cinematographer, stepped in and shot the entire sequence. The chase was deliberately scheduled last in principal photography, specifically in the event cast members were injured. Stunt coordinator Buddy Joe Hooker oversaw the sequence. William Peterson handled much of his own driving. His co-star John Pankow did not need to act frightened. The 18-wheeler jackknife was achieved by attaching the rear axle of a semi to a 4-wheel drive truck via cable and pulling it sideways at speed. The sequence won the 1986 Stuntman Award for Best Feature Film Vehicular Stunt and Most Spectacular Sequence. The film was made for around $6 million and grossed approximately $17 million worldwide. Modest numbers. I don't think that is the point. What To Live and Die in L.A. proved is that a car chase can be a deliberate act of filmmaking, not just spectacle. This is the decade's argument that stunt work could be art. Knight Rider ran 4 seasons on NBC and consumed somewhere between 20 and 25 Pontiac Firebird Trans Ams over the course of production. Only 5 are confirmed to have survived. The rest were destroyed during filming or scrapped under the terms of GM's post-cancellation agreement with the studio. In spring 1983, a freight train derailment left a shipment of brand-new Trans Ams structurally compromised and legally unsaleable. GM's response was to transfer the entire damaged inventory to the Knight Rider production. Price per vehicle, $1. Stunt coordinator Jack Gill built the show's signature visual language around the turbo boost jump. The most recognizable version was filmed January 28, 1983 at Lang Ranch Parkway in Thousand Oaks, California. Gill had a bulldozer cut an actual gap into the existing road surface, creating a genuine ravine approximately 85 to 90 feet across. That single shot was reused in 5 separate episodes because the production team considered it too effective to retire. For scenes requiring Kit to operate without a visible driver, a stuntman lay flat on the passenger floor and controlled duplicate pedals and a secondary steering input, while David Hasselhoff sat above him looking composed. That illusion held for 4 years in front of 30 million viewers a week. Knight Rider is on this list for more than its stunt vocabulary. It proved something the industry had not fully accepted, that a specific car, given enough screen time and a coherent mechanical identity, could sustain audience investment as reliably as any human character. Every vehicle-centric franchise that came after owed something to this production. Mad Max 2. The Road Warrior was produced in Australia for 4.5 million Australian dollars, at the time the largest budget ever allocated to an Australian feature. Director George Miller held a medical degree. That fact becomes relevant almost immediately. Guy Norris, 21 years old, and performing his first professional stunt job, crashed a motorcycle into a wrecked vehicle during the tanker chase sequence and broke his femur. Miller treated him in the field. Then he reviewed the footage, considered what he had, and put it in the final cut. Norris estimates he essentially performed every figure who boarded the tanker during the climactic 15-minute sequence, changing costume between takes for different camera angles. The tanker itself was driven not by a professional stunt performer, but by Dennis Williams, a working commercial truck driver hired because nobody else on the crew could operate the vehicle's quad-box transmission. Williams was told not to eat for 12 hours before the rollover stunt in the event emergency treatment became necessary. The rollover was controlled by loading 10 tons of wet sand into sandbags positioned against one side of the vehicle. The listed safety equipment for the day included cardboard boxes. The 15-minute tanker chase is cited by working action directors more frequently than almost any single sequence from any decade. It was produced for almost nothing by a real commercial driver and a 21-year-old with a broken femur. Miller once said the cars of the post-apocalypse become fetishized like religious artifacts. He was describing his own film. The Road Warrior built that mythology out of sandbags and nerve. The Cannonball Run was the 6th highest grossing film of 1981, earning $72 million domestic on a $13 million budget. Hal Needham built it around the actual ambulance he had personally driven in the real 1979 Cannonball Baker C to Shining Sea Memorial race. Fitted with a 440 cubic inch engine capable of 145 miles per hour and a 90-gallon fuel tank. Jackie Chan, making one of his first American appearances, later credited the blooper reel Needham ran over the closing titles as a direct inspiration for his own outtake credit tradition. That format is standard in major productions to this day. But the Cannonball run is remembered inside the industry for something far darker than any of that. On June 25, 1980, stuntwoman Heidi von Beltz, 24 years old, was riding in a vehicle that had been hastily converted from left-hand to right-hand drive without the installation of a seatbelt. The steering column locked at approximately 60 miles per hour. The car struck another vehicle head-on. Von Beltz broke her neck at the 5th vertebra and was left quadriplegic. Her lawsuit changed everything permanently. Seatbelts became mandatory equipment in every stunt vehicle on every Hollywood production. The Directors Guild of America stripped directors of the authority to alter stunt plans on location without coordinator approval. Von Beltz was awarded $7 million, reduced to $3.2 million on appeal. The regulations her case produced remain the legal baseline for stunt production today. One film delivered Hal Needham's defining commercial statement and generated the safety framework that governs every production that has followed it. That is a complicated legacy to carry, but the industry carries it. The Blues Brothers destroyed 104 cars. Guinness confirmed the record. It stood for 18 years, until Blues Brothers 2000 deliberately exceeded it by exactly one vehicle. Director John Landis filmed the production across Chicago with 40 stunt drivers flown in every weekend, a 24-hour crash repair operation running continuously on the near west side, and a budget for chase sequences alone exceeding $3.5 million. Total production cost, $27.5 million, making it the most expensive comedy film produced to that point. 13 Bluesmobiles were sourced from California Highway Patrol fleet auctions. 60 police cars were purchased at $400 each. The Dixie Square Mall sequence was filmed inside a genuinely abandoned shopping complex in Harvey, Illinois. Landis personally drove one of the pursuing police vehicles in that scene. A Ford Pinto, owned by the film's Illinois Nazis characters, was dropped from a helicopter at 1,200 feet, a maneuver requiring a special airworthiness certificate from the Federal Aviation Administration before filming could legally proceed. The Bluesmobile reached 118 miles per hour under the Lake Street elevated rail line. I was genuinely not prepared for what the logistics of this production actually looked like when I dug into the records. Every stunt was practical. Every crash was real. There was no digital technology capable of replicating any of it. Landis said years later that he doubted you could get permission to do it again. He is almost certainly right. The Blues Brothers represents the absolute ceiling of what the practical stunt era was willing to attempt. It did not just approach that ceiling, it defined where the ceiling was. Nothing in the decade came close. Every significant technical innovation in 1980s Hollywood car stunt work traces back to one person. Hal Needham was born in Memphis in 1931, raised as a sharecropper's son in Arkansas, served as a paratrooper in Korea, and went on to work on 4,500 television episodes and over 310 feature films. He broke 56 bones over his career, punctured a lung, and broke his back twice. He also received the Academy Award for Scientific and Engineering Achievement in 1986, and an honorary Oscar in 2012. The device that defined his legacy, and in many ways defined the decade, was the McHugh cannon, invented for the 1974 film MCU. A cannon welded to the floorboard of the stunt vehicle, loaded with a wooden piston and a black powder charge, aimed directly at the road surface. On detonation, it drove the piston into the ground and flipped the car with no external ramp required. Needham's first test used too large a charge. The car went 30 feet into the air. He took 6 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a broken back. He refined the design and kept building. Modern productions use the nitrogen-powered version of that same device today. In 1986, Needham and engineer William Frederick received the Academy Scientific and Engineering Award for the Shotmaker Elite Camera Car and Crane. Before it existed, camera crews chased action sequences on motorcycles. After it, mobile filming of vehicle sequences became viable at production scale. That award sits alongside the honorary Oscar he received in 2012 when Quentin Tarantino stood at the podium and told the room he had spent his entire career stealing shots from Needham's films. Needham accepted the award and said he was the luckiest man alive and lucky to be alive. Given the resume, that second part is not sentiment. It is a factual assessment. The practical stunt era built during the 1980s did not end when CGI arrived in the 1990s. It became the standard that CGI has spent 30 years trying to reach. The cannon car, the shotmaker rig, the safety regulations that Heidi von Beltz's lawsuit forced into existence, the scale that the Blues Brothers proved was achievable. All of it became infrastructure. Every production that came after inherited it, whether they knew it or not. The Fast and Furious franchise has grossed over $7 billion worldwide. Its central creative logic, a specific car as a character, ensemble casting built around machines. The commitment to practical execution, even at nine-figure budgets, comes directly from the decade this video has covered. Dominic Toretto's Dodge Charger is a direct descendant of Hal Needham's Trans Am. That is not a metaphor, it is a production lineage. There is a reason directors keep insisting on practical vehicle work decades after digital simulation became technically viable. A real car leaving the ground has weight. It has consequence. You feel the difference even when you cannot name it. The coordinators and drivers who understood that in 1980 set a standard the industry has been chasing ever since. Nobody has cleared it yet.